For if you're not careful, our work for God can easily become a source of pride and an extension of our own egos. Moses was in danger of that happening. So how do you prevent burnout? We have this expression that comes down from Sligo Church, where I was a member for so many years. All are gifted, all are valued. Every single person is gifted. Every single person is valued. We may not have the same kinds of talents or the same number of talents, but God has given each of us a talent, and we can use it for His glory. And when Moses stands before the burning bush and God calls him to go out to Egypt and bring his children out of Egypt, what does Moses say? He makes all kinds of excuses and finally says, "Oh God, I'm not eloquent. I can't speak." And God turned to him and said, "Who made your tongue?" And it was so easy for God. God could have waved his magic wand and made Moses into an eloquent speaker. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. God says to him, "I am sending Aaron, your brother, and he will be your mouthpiece." God does not put all his eggs into one basket. He does not pour all of his talent into the pastor or the Sabbath school teacher or the music director. He gives us all talents, for all are gifted, all are valued. I looked at your nominating committee report because my mother has a copy of that, and I said to myself, it's a small church, but it looked like everybody's got something to do. And I think that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. And when you get people involved, they feel a part of the church. They're like stockholders of the church. They feel valued. And Moses was taught that at the burning bush. Lesson number 9. Got just 2 to go. Jesus is the only way to God. John 14:6, Jesus says what? "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes unto the Father but by me." John 5:39, "And this is life eternal, whom thou hast sent." The only way to God is Jesus. But how do I get that teaching from the story of Moses? The book of Deuteronomy ends with the death of Moses. And Joshua is now the new leader. And within a few weeks after Joshua takes over, the children of Israel cross over the Jordan River. They have that great victory over Jericho, and they have now entered into land flowing with milk and honey. 40 years of wandering in the wilderness under Moses. And it seems like Joshua takes them in just like that. And I said to myself, it's not fair. It's not fair. Moses did all the dirty work, and Joshua gets the credit. And then I thought about it, and I said, whenever I think of Moses, whenever you think of Moses, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Moses? 10 Commandments, basically. 10 Commandments. Moses has become synonymous with the 10 Commandments, which is the law. Joshua, on the other hand, is the Old Testament name for Jesus, Yeshua. So what this is saying is, you can keep the 10 Commandments all your life, 40 years or all your life. It will not take you into the promised land. But Yeshua, Joshua, which is Jesus, he will take you into the promised land. And I think that switch in leadership happened at that time for whatever reason. But this is a very important lesson that you must learn and I must learn. As Seventh-day Adventists, we have been so much enamored by the law, the keeping of the Sabbath, doing this and doing that, somehow believing, and somehow we have projected this image of the Adventist church around, and people get the impression that we are more legalists than people who love God. The story of Moses and Joshua tells us this, that Jesus, Yeshua, Joshua, will lead us into the promised land, not Moses and the keeping of the 10 Commandments. And then the final lesson. Your only existence is for the salvation of the lost. Your only existence here as a remnant church is for the salvation of the lost. If you think you're here as just another church, I have news for you. The world does not need you. And God does not need you. You are here for one purpose and one purpose alone. You're here for the salvation of the lost. And when you look at Moses' life, it was a life of self-sacrifice. He intervenes on behalf of his fellow Israelites in Egypt. He intervenes on behalf of Jethro's daughters. And throughout his 40 years of leadership, he intervenes on behalf of the stiff-necked people. And there was a time he stood before them and God said, God, I will not allow you to destroy them. He always puts himself at the service of other people. His whole life, his whole existence was for the salvation of others. And so must you be. Your existence here, God has called you here to serve other people. The American Express Card Company had a slogan some years ago: membership has its privileges. Right? You pay your fee, you have all these privileges. I'm here to tell you that the church is the only organization in the world that exists primarily for non-members. The church is the only organization that exists primarily for non-members. Our task is to reach out to those who do not know about Jesus. And if you do not do that, you might as well pull down the shutters, shut the door, and go out of business, because God and the world does not need you. You're here for the service of humanity, to work for the salvation of others. Elton Trueblood was a famous preacher from the last century. He makes this powerful statement: the church, however large its buildings, or however grand its ceremonies of vestments, is a denial of Christ if it is not reaching out to other people. Let me repeat that. The church, however large its buildings, or however grand its ceremonies of vestments, is a denial of Christ if it is not reaching out to other people. And so I tell you, what happens here on Saturday is not the most important part of your church life. What happens once you leave this place, that's the most important part of your church life. You go out to serve the lost. And that is your only reason for existence. For out there is a world dying to know about Jesus. They're looking for somebody who will save them from the shipwreck of life. A sailing ship was driven onto the rocky coasts of Scotland by the tremendous power of a hurricane. The winds were so violent, and the storm was the worst they had seen in years. And the ship was dashed onto the rocks and shattered into pieces. And since it was within sight of the shore, a large crowd had gathered, and they were watching that helplessly as the wind and the waves tossed it against the rocks and shattered into pieces. And no doubt many lost their lives. And as that group stood there on the shore, they said to themselves, can we do something? Can't we do something to rescue those people out there? Then a group of young men got together. They got a rowboat and said, we will go out there in the storm. We will go there at the peril of our own lives, and we will try to rescue the people, as many as we can. And so they got into that rowboat and they rowed away into the storm, into the gathering darkness. And the people on the shore waited and waited and waited. And then after a while, they got there to the ship just in time as it was about to go under. They rescued every person they could find, and they turned around and they were on their way back to the shore. When one of the young rescuers looked back, and there, clinging to the rigging as the ship was about to go down, was a man. Horror, desperation written all over his face. He was afraid. Nobody had seen him. He was somehow overlooked. And the young man said, let's go back. Let's go back and get him. And the rest said, no, we can't. We can't. The storm is getting worse. And the ship was almost overloaded. And if you go back, perhaps all of us will lose our life. And so they just kept on going until they came back to the shore. Once they reached there, this young man says, no, we've got to do something about that one man out there. And he says, if another man will go with me, I'm already tired. If another man will go with me, I will go and try to rescue that man still clinging to the rigging.